to people on the internet. We are still here at the AWS Santa Clara Summit, live from the Expo Hall. My name is Nikki. I'm a technical evangelist at AWS. And in this session, we're going to talk about one of my favorite things, blockchain. But before we do, go ahead and introduce yourself, and Nick as well.
Well, thanks a lot. Hey, everybody, I'm John Fritz. I run our Amazon Managed Blockchain team here at AWS.
He's the GM.
Excited to hear more from him, but hi, I'm Nick Walsh, and I'm also a technical evangelist here at AWS.
So I know there's like a lot of hype about blockchain right now, but before we get started, what is blockchain for those that don't know?
So blockchain is a technology that enables groups of customers or groups of entities to transact securely and share data securely in the concept of a decentralized network. And I guess we go into the different technology parts of blockchain, or where do you want to take it from there?
Just briefly, but I also want to know what is AWS's unique point of view around blockchain solutions and creating blockchain applications?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess to take a step back, and this is kind of how when we're working with customers to try and help them understand, well, to solve your use case, you really need more of a blockchain solution, a ledger database, or a database. I guess maybe taking even a step back and say kind of, how do we think about blockchain at a high level? And so if you give me a couple minutes, I'll kind of run through a little bit about how we position this stuff. So, kind of taking a step back actually, we recently launched a couple of services in the space. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But we kind of built these services, generally in AWS, you build things in response to customer use cases, not just because there's a lot of hype. And blockchain is one of the most hyped technologies out there. And so we really wanted to dive in with customers to think about kind of, when they said blockchain, what did they mean? And we actually found—
what do they really want?
Yeah, what do they really want? We actually found there were two buckets of use cases. And I kind of explain blockchain, you've got to explain the first centralized use case. And so, what we found is, for one use case, these customers asked for blockchain. What they really wanted was an immutable transaction log. Like maybe they were getting audited all the time and needed a way to present to an auditor, hey, look, this is what happened. It's immutable for sure. Or maybe they were worried about data integrity, where some data from 30 years ago might go bad, and 30 years from now they'll need to go back to that record, but they're worried about kind of what happened to that. These customers, once again, it's like a centralized use case. It's like, man, I wish my MySQL database could do this. The problem is that it's hard with audit logs and securing that stuff.
You have to create an audit table, and there's just a number of nightmares that come into creating that audit table.
Totally, hard to do that. And then they would go to blockchain technology and say, well, blockchain has all this stuff, right? Like decentralization, smart contracts, consensus. But it has this one component that's obviously pretty key to blockchain. It's where it gets its name, which is the ledger database that has that immutable record. But they didn't want all that other stuff. They just wanted the ledger component in their centralized world to have this attribute. So for that kind of bucket, we have, when we think about blockchain, we have a solution that's in our blockchain category, but it's actually a fully managed ledger database. And that's Amazon Quantum Ledger Database, QLDB. And so that's kind of like half the story of, well, blockchain, some of those use cases actually are better served by a ledger database. The second bucket of stuff when thinking about blockchain is more around decentralization, which is like blockchain.
Yes.
And that kind of use cases, where we got from, customers were like, well, we've got existing business network, we all want to transact with each other, but we've got this central authority we all have to work with. That central authority is slow, it takes 2 days to clear a transaction, it's expensive, they take a cut of every transaction, we still have to audit them, and we have to audit the guy we want to transact with, all this sort of stuff, when in reality, it should just be a quick point-to-point thing. And this isn't necessarily a cryptocurrency, this is like enterprises, like banks trying to transfer assets or credit swaps. Or other scenarios too, where groups of customers want to share data to have better outcomes, no one can decide who owns the database.
Healthcare.
Yeah, healthcare is great, right? Hospitals have all these data silos, and information gets lost, papers are actually getting shuffled with information.
Totally.
So how do you have like integrity on data and stuff? So for that use case, we've got these decentralized technologies, which are blockchain. These customers need a decentralized blockchain, a centralized ledger database, or a centralized database won't do it. And that's where we have managed blockchain and our blockchain solutions, which we'll talk about a little bit more, I'm sure, going on. But
so
that's
Amazon
kind of
managed blockchain is what he's talking about right now. And when was it actually first announced?
So we announced the service at reInvent, actually, in Andy's keynote back in late November, and it's currently in preview with one of the frameworks we support, Hyperledger Fabric.
Hyperledger Fabric, and eventually you will add support for
Ethereum as well.
Network.
Yeah, our second.
And what is the differences or advantages to choosing Hyperledger Fabric or the Ethereum network?
Yeah. That's a great question. And I mean, one of the things that we're excited about with the service is offering both frameworks because they are pretty different. And we're actually finding that
very different.
from the ground up. And so what we found is that Hyperledger Fabric, which is one of the open source projects in the Hyperledger Foundation, which is part of the Linux Foundation, it's a permission blockchain. So you know the entities who are in it, but you don't fully trust them. It might be a consortium of banks where all the banks work together, but no bank is going to give up its destiny to another financial institution. So this kind of creates the need for a permission network where there's a trust boundary, but it's not like what we'll talk about with Ethereum.
Right.
And so for these use cases, Fabric is great because it just has a lot of concepts around defining an organization with a root certificate.
But you get high throughput or faster throughput than Ethereum network.
Exactly, higher throughput because you're not guarding against Byzantine fault tolerance where you don't necessarily know, who's this random person. You know that it's Bank of America or some bank entity that's doing stuff. So you can increase the throughput. And there's just other features around access control too, where you might have a known consortium, but certain people shouldn't have access to certain stuff. So Fabric makes it easy to do those sorts of types of things that you'd want in a permission network. And those use cases also are kind of around ones where, like a supply chain too, you know the people that are in your supply chain, you know your logistics providers, you know your suppliers, your distributors, and you can build the network around that and lock it down. For Ethereum, on the other hand, obviously Ethereum is a huge network with thousands of nodes today with the name that's totally decentralized. And these are use cases where you have a public network that's truly not governed and anyone can join.
Yep.
And enterprise and startups are super interested in understanding how can we either use that directly or have a hybrid chain where I've got maybe a permissioned Ethereum chain that has a bridge to the mainnet, like a layer 2 type thing.
Yep.
And so, for those types of use cases, which is just fundamentally a little bit different than Fabric, Ethereum makes sense. Also, honestly, Ethereum's an easier way to get started. Writing your first code in Solidity, a little bit easier than writing in chain code. It's simpler, but
that's
also...
what I've done so far.
I mean, that's the best place to start. And Ethereum, though, doesn't have necessarily all the same access control features. So it's more simple, but it doesn't have some of the things you get with Fabric out of the box. So it depends on kind of the use case, what you're trying to do, public or permissioned, and kind of, what you're most comfortable working with.
Yeah, so to boil all that down, essentially what you're saying is that there is no one-size-fits-all solution that is best for every use case, right?
That's true.
Ultimately, if you look at the problems that exist out in the wild, like our customers are having, and you work backwards from there, you can build purpose-built solutions that effectively don't make them have trade-offs that are disadvantageous for them.
That's totally true, and that's kind of one of the reasons why we have both in the service. That we found that there are great use cases for both, and we want to make sure that we can meet the demands of customers who want to use this for a variety of different solutions.
So we know that Amazon Managed Blockchain has been in preview since reInvent. So can you share with us some of the most interesting customer use cases or references that you've experienced in preview so far?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we've got a variety of customers who are using it that we can talk about in a lot of different verticals, ranging from insurance. We've got Guardian Life, Liberty Mutual, two very large U.S. insurance companies, Verizon for telecom, GE Aviation, in healthcare, Philips Healthcare, Change Healthcare. So a bunch of companies, both large enterprises, Workday as well, companies that are kind of newer, all across the board, because really everyone's trying to figure out how can we use decentralization to kind of reinvent the way that we do business. I think we can go a little bit deeper into one. Actually, we just talked a little bit about it in the session I just had here at the summit. Singapore Exchange, which is a large financial institution in Singapore, has kind of does business all across the APAC region. And one of the things that they run is a kind of obviously the Singapore Stock Exchange, and ways for large financial institutions to trade assets. And the problems they were running into, or they saw in today, is that all these different banks use a variety of different APIs. There's no kind of one way banks can communicate. No one really trusts each other, and so the settlement process is super painful and takes a long time and long, kind of like the use case I talked about before. And so they've embarked on a project first for their domestic trading, and then soon to be rolled out to, say, cross-region payments, where they'll port the system they have today, which is kind of bespoke and cobbled together, into a Fabric network on Managed Blockchain to make it easier. And so far they found that it is achieving a lot of what they want. It's faster and easier. It's relatively easy to add new people to the network as well. And so as these kind of organizations grow, when you don't have kind of this idea of a network, it's hard to kind of add somebody in. And so this network is growing pretty fast, has the ability to have auditors and other people join as members as well to make things transparent. And from a framework perspective, they're getting kind of the access control features and the way to define organizations that they want out of it. So from a financial services standpoint, that's one. And over time, we're still in preview. We're developing other references that hopefully we can share with customers to teach them more about and show what people are doing and get down to the specifics of how this stuff can be leveraged.
Super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, following up on that, like, is there any sort of like end-to-end use case that you see has been like a smashing success? Like, obviously there's many different companies using it, but what do you think is like one of the best pairings for like this blockchain technology to an existing customer that's using it already?
Yeah, well, I mean, the one that I just shot up,
The Singapore
the
Exchange.
Singapore Exchange one is good, but I think that can be extended. And actually, one of the things they found was, hey, look, this model actually works well for a lot of other just general asset transfers.
Wow.
And if you think about kind of these networks, you can code up an asset. The asset could be a financial thing. It could be customer information, like from your customer, say a customer that's across many different organizations, a way to share that and that information securely. I think supply chain optimization is a great one that we're seeing a lot of interest amongst heavy machinery companies, the companies that they're in the food business and want to track product recalls and food quality and everything in between on how to make these large global networks efficient, transparent, and kind of easier to run and giving people the visibility into what's truly going on at a global scale. So we've seen those two as the front runner, but I think we've also seen just all sorts of experimentation from startups saying, hey, look, why is real estate done the way it is today? Why can't we build a new asset defined by smart contracts to allow more people to, say, buy into large commercial real estate deals? Or why do I need escrow for a house? Or all sorts of stuff that obviously there's network effects and other things that need to happen for some of these use cases. But if you think, years ahead, if this stuff is going to make things more efficient, it's got to start now in order to build that kind of future where things operate though.
And ultimately, like this very large scale impact that blockchain stands to have is really what's driving a lot of this excitement, right?
Yeah, I think there's kind of, and some of it's good and bad in the sense that there's this hype of, oh, you can use blockchain to change everything. And there's some cases where it will make a big change, others where it's a lot more uncertain. I think what we're hearing from customers is actually discrete use cases saying, this is a real problem we've got in our supply chain, and it's this coordination problem or the ability for people to kind of pay using automation and kind of independently verifying things are real, and we know this is a real thing, we want to use this for that. So I think we're focused on both these kind of big ideas on how could the world be, or how could certain processes be reinvented, but also focusing on the small stuff that's here and now as well, that hey look, there's a discrete problem we've got in music royalties. We don't know necessarily what percentage of this song play goes to who, and that changes over time. And there's the broadcaster and the licensee and the artist. How do we get all this into one system? And these are things that I feel like are much more tangible, and we're working with customers now, at a high level on these sorts of things.
So I'm impatient, and I just want to see the demo. I want to see this thing in action. How about you?
Do you have a demo here?
We have a demo.
Wonderful. So why don't you take it away?
Yeah, sure. The demo's a pretty quick one. We don't have that much time, but it's a quick view into our console. This is actually the preview console. So if you sign up for the preview and get added, you have access to this. And it's super easy to create a network. Actually, this is like the landing page where you'd first end up. Right now, we've only got Fabric available in preview.
Right.
Ethereum's coming soon. But this is a page. You select your framework, your network name. We can call it FritzNet. Description, we'll call it test. Hit next. And then that's kind of like the network name. And then I say, well, I've got to have a member on the network that's me, and then I can invite other members to join. So we can say it's John Fritz, description, we'll call it test. And then this is kind of my admin password for my stuff, so I can create more users. So I want to make it a secret, so no one knows what it is. And then hit next. I won't actually create it right here, but that's basically it. So if I hit next, then a Fabric Network's created all the networking, all the shared components, my membership, the root CA with KMS, all that stuff is created behind the hood, and within 15 minutes, you've got one of these networks set up. And then what you can do is go and add other accounts, let's say other businesses that want to be part of one of these permission networks. They join with their own AWS account. And actually, here's kind of a view of a one-member network. So if I hit create, within 15 minutes, I'd have this running. And this is the network. It shows some of the details. I can create a VPC endpoint to interact with my components. Here's my member, so that's like my group on the network.
Your node.
I've got one peer node, so when I download my open source Hyperledger Fabric client, run it on EC2 machine in my VPC. This is how I connect.
Endpoint.
It's my endpoint. Here's where I go create new users. That's that CA endpoint. And that's basically all of the Hyperledger Fabric components exposed securely via a VPC endpoint that I can use. Real quick before we're done, this is kind of what one, it looks like I deleted this one, but if you have multiple members in here, they all show up. Obviously, I can't go and create peer nodes in another person's network, but that's kind of what it starts looking like when you grow it. This is a preview, so actually, new features are being added each week. We have an interesting feature on voting, where if you think about it, if 4 people are in a network, how do we decide whether to invite somebody else or not? If it's decentralized, not one person should be able to decide. So we're actually implementing a way to vote where it's like kind of different, like an S3 bucket. One person owns it, so you delete it, it's gone. you might add other people to use it, but I own it. In this case, not actually anyone owns the network. So
Right.
I can create the network, invite everybody, and you guys might kick me out because maybe I've been behaving badly and committed fraud or something. I don't
maybe
know.
you got banned.
Yeah, or banned. You can vote to kick me out, and the network's fine. It's not like, hey,
It'll stay up and running.
it's as if somebody else created it. No one owns it, and so
Wow.
Yeah.
or everyone owns it. You could think about it that way.
So we talk a lot in traditional software about how developers want to focus on writing their business logic, right? So what we saw here in what was like 30 seconds to a minute with you actually spinning up the network, that handled all of the ops around the network, right? Everything
Yeah.
beyond that was you deciding, who do I want to add to this network? How do I want this to be utilized? And really, that's what people are most excited about, right?
Yeah.
Like getting to actually use it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the goal here and what we found is that, especially with things like Hyperledger Fabric, it's complicated software. Like for instance, with Fabric,
Yeah, it is.
there's a component called the ordering service that's shared by everybody in the network. At open source, what you do is you'd create a highly available Apache Kafka cluster. So you create Zookeeper and put a Zookeeper in each EC2 availability zone, and then run Kafka as a backing for this service. Which actually,
Wow.
Kafka's great. Like we've got managed Kafka now, and I think it's a great open source thing. But it's even with managed Kafka, it's a little bit easier to manage, but also it's not like the right tool for some of this stuff for the ordering service needs to do. And so there's some components that we have. We actually run the same journal technology that backs the QLDB journal under our ordering service. And so we use some different stuff as well. But we use KMS to guard the root CA, like all these things to make it easy to stand up, that oftentimes customers who want to run Fabric either spend a couple months like building it themselves,
Right.
or spending a lot of money on consulting help to go do it, then they can't manage it themselves. And the goal was, if we could take all of that away, can people iterate much more quickly?
And it's still a lot of
build
new.
stuff.
There's not a lot of developers with blockchain skills necessarily, so it's
Yeah.
even harder when you have to build the network, create it, and then hire a team to.
Yeah, I think even building smart contracts is a relatively new skill, so it's like that's
Yeah.
almost overload and people don't know where to start. So the hope is if we can give people a platform to learn about more the application tier, and most importantly, like how it affects their business, that if you're in the supply chain business, you know more about supply chain in your niche than anyone else does. So
That's right.
so that's kind of what you're bringing into these development. How can we kind of take all the general undifferentiated heavy lifting away? And so that's the goal with some of this
And
stuff.
bring your own skills into the equation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we've seen similar parallels in like AI, for example, right? Where like it's very a specific set of skills to be able to perform machine learning from scratch.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, your business use case in a way that can provide a lot of value is an off-the-shelf model that already exists.
Yeah.
And so essentially, there are a lot of use cases where these existing networks or chains, if they can be provisioned and spun up easily through a service like this, that provides all the value someone needs, and building it from the ground up may not actually provide much more additional value to them.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts, or where can our viewers go to learn more about Amazon Managed Blockchain?
Yeah, so you can go to, on the AWS website, we've got a landing page for Managed Blockchain.
I'm going to post it in the chat.
Awesome. And there's some information on what the service does. There's a link to sign up for the preview. And so if you've got an AWS account, you can sign up for the preview. We add new accounts every couple of weeks. And you can use it for free for now. The preview is free of charge. You get to create a network, Hyperledger Fabric network, and start playing around. We've also got the documentation. There's a link from our the webpage to that. And then finally, on our AWS database blog, we have kind of a getting started tutorial that walks you through creating a network, deploying your first smart contract, kind of setting up some of the Fabric permissioning things. And the application is kind of cool too. It has a full like web tier, so it's not just the blockchain part, but it has a UI and other things that you can do as well. And so it's a great way to kind of get used to how this stuff works and get accustomed to the service.
I can't wait to play around with it. Can't wait till I get access. Any final thoughts you want to share? We're running out of time here, but
Not really. I'd say just it's a new service in preview. We'd love for you to try it out. If you have any feedback, definitely let us know too. I think we've got an alias on our website for feedback, and so we're always interested in what your use cases are, how you're using it, and things that we can do to help you and what you're building.
awesome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
We'll see you next time. Bye, guys.
Thanks for coming.